next I'm going to define elements of a crime. So first, the prosecution must prove corpus delicti, and corpus delicti means body of the crime. This also refers to the essential elements of a crime that the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are 5 general principles in defining the elements of a particular offense. Actus reus, also known as a guilty act. Mens rea, a particular level of criminal intent. The guilty act and criminal intent are related, or the union of the guilty act and criminal intent. And many crimes also require the prosecutor to prove the presence of certain accompanying circumstances and or the guilty act caused a particular result. First is actus reus. So actus reus is needed before there can even be a crime. Criminal liability only occurs after a voluntary act that results in criminal harm. This requirement reflects a fundamental principle of American law, which is that no one should be punished solely for having bad thoughts. There are different types of actus reus. So one of them is omission, or a failure to act when there is a legal duty to act. This could be like a lifeguard that is on duty that sees someone drowning and they don't perform life-saving measures for them. Or this could be possession, which could just be possessing an illegal drug. There is such a thing as an attempted guilty act, which is why we have attempted murder or attempted burglary. This is a special subdivision of the guilty act, and the law does not want someone to avoid legal liability only because someone or something prevented the actual commission of the crime. The penalties for an attempted crime versus just the crime are less severe than if the crime had actually been happened. So the next one is mens rea, which is criminal intent. There are 2 elements of crime. The first one we just talked about, which is actus reus, or the guilty act. This one is the mental state of when that act is committed. This is because criminal sanctions are not necessary for people who commit crime or cause harm innocently. This is why the mental state or criminal intent must be required for a crime to have been committed. Mens rea, or criminal intent, is difficult to define because it refers to a subjective condition, which would be the state of mind of when the act happened. There are crimes where the legislature specifically define the mental state needed, and this has added new concepts of mental states to the traditional ones. For example, we have larceny, which you need to prove that there is the intent that this person purposefully took something that did not belong to them to deprive another person of this object. Whereas negligent homicide, you don't need to prove that they intended to kill someone. You just need to prove that they did kill someone. Next is the union of the guilty act and the criminal intent. So this means that the act and the intent must occur together. For example, if you are a student and you pick up a book thinking that it's yours and you walk away with it, but it turns out it is another student's book, you would not be guilty of theft, because although you have the guilty act or the actus reus, you do not have the criminal intent or the mens rea. Next are attendant circumstances. Some crimes do require the attendance or absence of accompanying circumstances. Location is a good example of this, because if you are driving 150 miles an hour on a public road, that is one heck of a speeding ticket, and it could be reckless driving, you could get your license taken away, points on your license, all of that. However, if you are driving 150 miles an hour on a racetrack, that is clearly acceptable. Attendant circumstances are also used in defining the degree of the crime. So if someone steals less than $500 worth of items, it could only be a misdemeanor. Whereas if they steal more than $500, it is a felony. This results in only a few number of crimes does the result not matter. So, for example, the difference between homicide and battery is that the victim most likely lives. The degrees of battery depends on how injured the victim is. However, the concept of result and intent are different. So, in my previous example, the defendant may have had the same intent, but the only difference could have been how skillful they were in carrying out their crime, or even how healthy the victim is. To recap, in this final part, I went over the due process, I went over the Bill of Rights, I went through the introduction to criminal law, and I went through the elements of a crime, which are actus reus, mens rea, the union of the guilty act and the criminal intent, and the attendant circumstances. Thank you.